My name is Andrea Jones, and I am going to be going over my son's milestones that he reached at home. This is my firstborn son, Melborn Halo Meador. His nicknames are Halo, Melby, and Poochie Nook. The very first milestone that I feel was incredible for Melbourne to reach was nursing. He didn't really like the formula because I had already started trying to get him to nurse at the hospital when he was born. When I brought him home from the hospital, he did not want to take a bottle. It seemed like the formula was also upsetting his tummy. Notice that I have a pump for milk next to me here on this recliner sofa. He started nursing very well, and I was able to get him to take bottles as long as the bottles were filled with my breast milk. Melbourne did not want to allow me to put him down when he first came home from the hospital. I would fall asleep with him on my bed, and if I tried to put him in his bassinet, he would scream very loudly. This required for me to have to prop my feet up on my recliner sofa, and I would have to sleep with Melbourne in my arms the entire night. If I fell asleep nursing him in my bed, then we would sleep like that until he got older. Once he got older, I had to teach him to sleep in his crib. He did very well during the daytime, and then I had to teach him to sleep in his crib at night. He also did very well with sleeping in his crib at night until the morning. Taking baths was a bit of a hassle at first. Melbourne was afraid of the water and the sound of the water coming out of the faucet into the tub when he was a newborn. I tried to use the baby bath equipment, but he did not like that either. He wanted to be held. In order for me to bathe Melbourne when he was a newborn, I had to sit in the bathtub, hold him in my arms, and nurse him as I washed his body. And this was the way that I was able to get him clean without any issues. Once he got a little older to where he was standing and walking, then he would allow me to run some water, and I could kneel on the side of the tub and wash him carefully in the bathtub. I got him some bath toys, and he really loved them. Eating regular foods was pretty easy for Melbourne because he had an appetite. The only thing is he was a baby, so I was feeding him the baby food originally, but I had to start blending the baby food with actual food that I cooked. I just felt that the baby food was not enough, and I would blend meats that I cooked in a blender. I would heat up the baby foods and I would mix them together and feed them to him that way. When he got old enough, he could eat full meals that I cooked, and I fed them to him. I was a little nervous when I started to see him picking up his head. The concerns that I had was his head falling when he was not able to lift up his head. So I had to hold his head up like normal with most babies and be careful with his head until he was able to hold up his own head, which didn't take very long. Another thing that concerned me was that he couldn't talk or tell me if anything was wrong. So when he would cry, he would exaggerate and cough. So at first, I didn't know if there was something really wrong with him as to why he was coughing until I realized that he was just doing that when he cried for attention. He was very dramatic when he cried, so I made sure that he did not have to cry too often by being there for him and giving him what he needed. That was my care. When it was time for Melborn to start crawling, he would drag his feet and pull himself around with his arms. I was concerned if my child would have a problem with walking. It wasn't long before he started crawling correctly. I would pay very close attention to his body. And when all of his body parts began to work properly on his own, he was crawling everywhere in no time. And he was crawling extremely fast. When I noticed Melbourne lifting up and that he couldn't walk yet, I was concerned about whether or not he could be able to walk. So I started holding his hands and just trying to get him to take a step or two with me. He loved me so much that I was able to sit in front of him and tell him, "Come to me." And he walked to me. That is how he started walking. And I would just take his hand and walk him around the living room. Soon he was walking on his own, and I was so proud of him. Running. Then he started running all over the house and even jumping on the bed. I was concerned about Melbourne's ability to listen to me. When I told him to stop jumping on my bed, it was as if he didn't understand. Part of me felt like he did, but he just kept laughing, then running to keep jumping on the bed after I told him to stop. At that point, I wanted to know, how do I get Melbourne to understand me? I went into the bedroom one day and I just said, I'm just going to talk to him like an adult. And I said, Melbourne, the reason why I am asking you to stop jumping on my bed is because I don't want you to fall off and get hurt. You're going to bump your head, you're going to cry, and it's going to hurt really bad. I said, Mommy does not want you to get hurt. So will you please get down and stop jumping on my bed? He smiled at me as if he understood every word that I said. And then he got down off of my bed. Melby was talking, and soon enough, he was able to tell me just about everything that he wanted. And I love the fact that we were able to communicate. When it was nap time, I had to start putting him in his crib. He did not like that at first, and he shook the wooden crib as if he were trying to break it. I stood at the door to see if he was strong enough to break it, and he was not. So I went in the room and I spoke with him again, like an adult. And I told him, I said, you're very tired. If you just lay down, once you wake up, I'll come right back in here to get you. And he laid down. That's how I was able to start getting Melborn to just lay down in his crib for nap time and bedtime. Instead of crying when he got up in the morning or from naps, he would say, "Ma." He would call me, "Mom," to come into the room to get him. I was so blown away when I heard my baby calling me from the other room. He was so small. I said, wow, he has really grown. He even got to the point where he could tell me when he wanted to nurse, and he would come up to me and tell me that he wanted milk. This was a long way from crying and screaming for me to nurse him.